It happened in a flash, the kind of explosive moment that feels like it tears straight through the internet, dragging every rumor, every whisper, and every hidden suspicion out into the blinding spotlight. Jasmine didn't slip her revelation quietly into a comment section or hint at it through vague, mysterious posts. She dropped it publicly, directly, and with a confidence that suggested she had been sitting on this truth far longer than anyone realized. In one breath, she claimed that Mendeecees wasn't just being friendly or careless, but that something meaningful had happened between him and Dixon at an Atlanta lounge. And the second those words hit the screen, the digital world ignited. Fans flooded timelines, blogs scrambled for headlines, and Instagram Lives sparked up like emergency alarms as people demanded receipts, clarity, and context. It wasn't simply what she said, it was the timing, the tone, the certainty in her voice, as if she had watched the entire thing unfold from a front row seat. The shockwaves were instant. Was this just another castmate stirring chaos for attention? Or was Jasmine exposing something everyone else was too afraid to say out loud? The allegations split the fanbase into two heated camps: those who believed Jasmine had no reason to lie, and those who insisted that no solid proof had been shown yet. But even without evidence, the narrative spun faster than anyone could control it. Why would Jasmine risk her own reputation to make a claim this bold? What exactly did she see at that lounge that convinced her this wasn't innocent? And more importantly, what would this mean for Yandy, who had already been juggling public pressure, private battles, and a marriage under constant stress? The more people replayed Jasmine's words, the more the questions multiplied. Was Mendeecees drifting emotionally before this? Did Erica unintentionally step into a vulnerable moment? Or had everything been building quietly behind the scenes while the cameras captured only fragments? By the time the dust settled, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just drama, it was the beginning of a story that would test loyalty, trust, image, and the fragile lines between truth and perception. In the aftermath of Jasmine's claim, the spotlight swung sharply toward Mendeecees. And suddenly, every detail of his recent behavior looked different, heavier, and tangled in unspoken tension. After his release, he had carefully crafted a public persona built on discipline, redemption, and responsibility. A man determined to present himself as someone who had learned from the darkest chapters of his life. But behind that polished exterior, there were cracks, emotional gaps that he rarely admitted to, and vulnerabilities he tried to cover with humor, busyness, and constant forward motion. Freedom didn't erase the years he spent separated from his family, the loneliness that hardened into habit, or the pressure to rebuild an image while carrying the weight of past mistakes. People saw a confident man giving interviews and smiling for cameras, but they didn't see the private moments where he felt misunderstood, disconnected, or quietly judged by those he loved most. That emotional void made him more reachable than he realized, more open to outside validation and softer conversations that felt effortless compared to the expectations at home. It wasn't intentional weakness. It was the human response to feeling like he had to prove himself every day while still carrying silent doubts. And when someone like Erica, familiar, grounded, and linked by shared history, appeared in his orbit, it created a space that felt oddly safe, even if he didn't acknowledge it. She understood certain pressures instinctively, and that familiarity alone could blur boundaries without either person meaning for it to happen. That's the risk Jasmine was hinting at, the subtle danger of emotional access. The quiet places where trust can fracture, not through physical action, but through unresolved wounds. Mendeecees didn't set out to betray anyone, but he was standing on thin emotional ground. And the world around him was quick to seize on any sign of imbalance, whether he intended it or not. The version of him after prison, hungry for validation, eager to rebuild, but starving for peace, created the perfect storm that made every rumor feel frighteningly plausible. Dixon's story has always carried the weight of old wounds, the kind that never fully heal but instead shape every future decision, every guarded glance, and every instinct towards self-protection. Long before this situation ever became public noise, she had learned the hard way that survival and love requires both backbone and boundaries. And this is what made her approach to relationships so precise, so cautious, and so rooted in truth. Co-parenting brought its own complications, demanding patience, emotional restraint, and constant clarity as she navigated the messy intersection of past pain and present responsibilities, all while trying to maintain a stable environment for her child. And in that process, she built a private code honesty above everything, transparency, without exception, and respect as the baseline for any connection that came near her. Yet the emotional familiarity she shared with Mendeecees wasn't born from romance or longing. It emerged from the simple truth that both of them had once lived through parallel forms of hurt. He understood the burden of public judgment, and she understood the exhaustion of being misunderstood. And somewhere in that overlap, an unspoken recognition developed between them. Not flirtation, not temptations to people who knew what it felt like to be emotionally bruised and still trying to keep going. But that familiarity, innocent as it seemed, also created a fragile opening, a space where clarity could be misread, where comfort could be twisted by outsiders, and where proximity could begin to look like something deeper than it truly was. And as tension increased and situations became more tangled, Erica remained steady, relying on her values, her history, and her instinct for truth, never crossing a line but always aware of how easily narratives can be manipulated when emotions, reputations, and past mistakes are involved. In the middle of rising rumors and whispered accusations, her honesty became her shield and her emotional walls became her survival tool, even as she watched the situation around her gather momentum she had never asked for. From the very beginning, Jasmine occupied a unique space within the group, close enough to observe the raw, unfiltered energy between everyone, yet removed enough to remain objective. A quiet witness to the emotional undercurrents others either ignored or tried to hide. She wasn't just someone who listened. She was someone who noticed everything: the shifts in tone, the sudden glances, the pauses in conversation, and the tension that flickered between people long before any words were exchanged. What made her perspective even more vital was her ability to read energy with unnerving accuracy, picking up on subtle cues that others brushed off as overthinking or coincidence. And it was in those early weeks that she began seeing signs, not dramatic, not explosive, but small patterns that hinted at something beneath the surface. A few deleted messages here and there, quiet conversations that abruptly stopped when someone walked into the room, and late-night DMs that Mendeecees claimed were nothing serious, even though the timing alone raised questions. Jasmine tried not to assume the worst, but her instincts kept tapping her shoulder, reminding her that emotional friction rarely appears out of nowhere. She watched as certain interactions stretched a little too long, as replies came a little too quickly, and as excuses began appearing in places where they hadn't existed before. And each time she noticed something, she tucked it away, not because she wanted drama, but because experience had taught her that early signs always matter. The slow burn was real subtle shifts, quiet hesitations, and a growing emotional fog that suggested people were hiding more than they admitted. When the lounge story surfaced, Jasmine wasn't shocked. She had already sensed a buildup, an emotional closeness forming without anyone acknowledging it. And while others dismissed the early hints as overreaction, Jasmine recognized them as red flags marking the path to a much louder explosion. The messages, the glances, the unspoken tension, it all formed a pattern she could no longer ignore. And when everything finally came to light, she understood that she had been watching this slow unraveling long before anyone else dared to speak it aloud. The Atlanta lounge was dim, crowded, and pulsing with low bass when Jasmine walked in that night, completely unaware that she was about to witness the moment that would blow everything open and drag every hidden tension into the spotlight. She first saw Mendeecees near the corner booth, shoulders leaned forward, hands clasped like he was trying to appear casual but couldn't quite disguise the undercurrent of nerves running through him. Across from him sat Erica, her posture stiff at first, then slowly relaxing as the conversation deepened into something far more personal than the room around them suggested. Jasmine wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their booth was only a few steps away from the bar, and the mix of raised voices, nervous laughs, and shifting body language made it impossible not to notice. Mendeecees spoke in a tone Jasmine had only heard him use during vulnerable moments, low, steady, almost seeking reassurance, and Erica responded with a softness she usually kept guarded behind her emotional walls. At one point, Mendeecees said, "I just feel misunderstood at home," a sentence that hung in the air like a confession neither of them planned to dissect. Erica sighed, leaning closer, saying, "You can't keep holding everything in." And the sincerity in her voice carried the weight of someone who knew exactly what emotional isolation felt like. What made Jasmine freeze was what happened next. Mendeecees reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Not a romantic gesture, not a flirtation, but a searching moment of connection that still crossed a line, simply because of who they were and the fragile history they shared. Erica didn't pull back immediately. She let the contact linger a second too long before slowly withdrawing, her eyes darting away as if reminding herself of the boundary she couldn't break. But that single pause, that half second of shared oxygen, was enough to shift the atmosphere around them. Jasmine saw Erica wipe her palms on her jeans afterward, trying to steady herself, while Mendeecees leaned back, exhaling like he'd released something he shouldn't have said or done. They weren't arguing, they weren't laughing, they weren't making a scene. Instead, it looked like two people who had slipped into emotional familiarity, quietly that they didn't realize how visible it had become. A server walked by, and Mendeecees instinctively placed his hand on Erica's back as she moved to let them pass. Another moment of closeness that might have meant nothing if the context wasn't so loaded. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten because she knew that if someone took a picture at the right angle, or caught half a sentence, the entire situation could be twisted into a narrative neither of them intended. As the night went on, their conversation grew softer, more intense, and filled with unspoken truths that neither had the courage to fully articulate. And Jasmine kept watching not because she wanted to, but because she understood that secrets always reveal themselves in the smallest movements, the quietest interactions, and the moments where people forget they're being observed. When they finally stood to leave, the energy between them felt heavier, as if the line they had tiptoed around all night had finally blurred enough to be undeniable. And as they walked out, Mendeecees placing a steadying hand on Erica's arm. Jasmine knew this was the turning point, the moment everything shifted from questionable to catastrophic. The photo reached Yandy just after sunset. A single image sent with no caption, no explanation. And no mercy. Mendeecees and Erica seated close together in the lounge booth, his hand angled in a way that looked far more intimate than either of them probably intended. And Erica's expression caught mid-sigh, soft, vulnerable, and dangerously open to interpretation. Yandy stared at the screen, her heartbeat thudding in her ears as the kitchen lights flickered against the marble countertop, making everything feel sharper, colder, and more real than she was prepared for. She kept zooming in, searching for context, for a shadow, a reflection, anything that would tell her this wasn't what it looked like. But the more she studied it, the heavier the truth felt. There was no angle where the image looked innocent. When Mendeecees walked in, keys dropping onto the counter with a clatter that cut through the silence, he immediately sensed the tension, freezing when he saw her gripping the phone like it was evidence in a trial. "What's that?" he asked, voice already carrying fear beneath the surface. Yandy didn't yell, didn't throw anything. Instead, she held the phone toward him, her voice steady but breaking at the edges as she said, "Explain this." "Right now?" Mendeecees swallowed hard, eyes widening as he recognized the photo, stammering that it was nothing, that people read too much into moments, that Erica had been stressed, that he was only trying to comfort her. But every excuse sounded thinner than the last. And Yandy felt the ground tilt beneath her because the betrayal wasn't in what he said, was in what he didn't say. The pauses, the hesitation, the way he searched for words instead of speaking the truth immediately. She stepped back, tears forming but refusing to fall, telling him she could accept almost anything except dishonesty, and that this photo had exposed more emotional distance between them than she realized existed. Mendeecees tried to reach for her, repeating that it wasn't what she thought, but his voice cracked under the weight of his own guilt. And Yandy finally whispered, "Then why does it look exactly like everything I feared?" The kitchen fell silent, thick with heartbreak, confusion, and the slow collapse of trust that had taken years to build but only seconds to fracture. The first message arrived at 2:14 a.m., a grainy, zoomed-in photo of Yandy's living room window taken from outside, with the caption, "You're looking in the wrong direction." At first, she thought it was a prank or some twisted attempt at intimidation from a random troll. But the second message arrived seconds later, a short, silent video showing the exact outfit Mendeecees wore earlier that evening as he entered their home, filmed from an angle no neighbor could naturally see. That was the moment her heart dropped, because the realization hit hard and fast. Someone wasn't just observing them from afar. Someone was close enough to record their movements, track their arguments, and insert themselves into the cracks of their already shaking relationship. Over the next few hours, more images appeared, screenshots of deleted social media stories, blurry captures of the lounge meet, and a chilling text that read, "Truth isn't what you're seeing, it's what you're ignoring." The implication sent a sharp coldness through her chest. Whoever this watcher was, they weren't just exposing the situation, they were orchestrating the escalation, nudging each person toward paranoia, mistrust, and emotional collapse. One video in particular broke her composure. A slow pan across her kitchen, taken from what looked like a hidden camera, capturing the exact moment she confronted Mendeecees. Her voice trembling, his face pale, and both of them unaware they were being recorded. She replayed it in horror, realizing whoever filmed it had access to their home, their privacy, and their vulnerabilities. The messages escalated too. Another text said, "You're blaming the wrong people," followed by a looping clip of Erica stepping into the lounge, but shot from a completely different angle that required someone to already be waiting. Then came the final clue, the one that tied everything together. A message containing a blurry silhouette of a woman standing near the lounge entrance right before Mendeecees and Erica met. Her phone raised, her posture stiff, and her attention locked onto them with unsettling intent. Yandy stared at the image for almost a minute before the truth settled like a weight she could no longer ignore. This wasn't a stranger, a fan, or an opportunistic troll. This was someone inside the circle. Someone who knew their patterns, their weaknesses, and their breaking points. Someone who wanted the story to explode. The breakthrough came when Jasmine, scrolling through the anonymous clips with suspicion tightening in her chest, noticed a reflection in one of the lounge videos. Faint outline captured in a mirrored surface behind Mendeecees and Erica. She froze the frame, zoomed in, and felt her stomach twist as the silhouette sharpened into a familiar shape. Samantha, standing just a few feet away, phone raised. Her expression cold and focused, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. The hidden angles, the perfectly timed screenshots, the stalking-level footage, it all aligned with her. When Jasmine showed Yandy, the shock wasn't just betrayal, it was recognition. Samantha had a history, a long-buried resentment built from years of feeling dismissed, overshadowed, and unappreciated. She had once been close to Yandy, almost like a sister friend within their circle. But their bond had fractured after a private disagreement over loyalty, boundaries, and a moment Samantha believed Yandy handled coldly. That grudge, quiet at first, had grown into something darker, something obsessive, pushing her to collect moments, twist narratives, and weaponize every interaction she captured. The video evidence removed all doubt. Samantha had followed Mendeecees to the lounge, recorded Erica's arrival, and positioned herself to catch every angle, every nuance, every tiny detail she could later manipulate. Her motive was painfully clear. She wanted to expose cracks, disrupt trust, and watch the relationship crumble under the weight of carefully curated proof. What made it worse was the realization that Samantha hadn't just documented the situation. She had fed it, nudging conversations, dropping hints, and planting seeds of suspicion until the entire conflict spiraled out of control. And now, with video evidence confirming her involvement, Samantha transformed from a background figure into the central antagonist, someone whose bitterness had turned into a weapon shaped from surveillance, secrecy, and a desire to see Yandy fall. The first location ping came through as a random shared address, a long-abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta. The type of place that felt wrong the moment you looked at it, too quiet, too empty, too deliberately chosen. Yandy, Jasmine, and a small circle of trusted friends drove out together, each mile increasing the sense that this wasn't just another setup or petty attempt at intimidation. This was something darker, calculated, and tied to someone who wanted the chaos to escalate. When they arrived, the air was cold and still, the metal walls echoing faintly as they stepped inside, their footsteps bouncing back like warnings. A single tablet sat on a crate in the center of the room, already recording when they approached, the screen flickering before playing a video that made everyone freeze. Lil Mendeecees, sitting in what looked like a daycare hallway, glancing around nervously as a woman's voice behind the camera said, "He doesn't know anything yet, but you should." The implication hit hard, sending a bolt of fear through Yandy so sharp she had to steady herself. But the real shock came seconds later when the warehouse door slammed shut and Kim Mendeecees' longtime friend with a complicated history stepped out from the shadows, hands raised as if to show she wasn't a threat. Yet her expression suggested she knew far more than she had ever admitted. She claimed she had followed the anonymous messages too, that she'd been receiving threats of her own, and that whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting Mendeecees and Yandy's relationship, but the entire network of people connected to them. Her voice shook as she explained there were stakes no one had considered, that the footage of Lil Mendeecees wasn't about custody battles or emotional manipulation, it was leverage, meant to push someone into breaking. The warehouse felt colder with every word she spoke, the dim lights casting long shadows that made every corner seem like a hiding place for another secret. And just when they thought that tension couldn't climb any higher, Another ping hit Jasmine's phone, this time a live feed from somewhere unknown, confirming that the watcher wasn't done. This was only the beginning of something far larger and far more dangerous than they ever expected. The final twist dropped without warning, delivered through a last-minute message that flashed onto Jasmine's phone with a tone like an alarm. "You're still missing the real woman." Attached was a single photo, Samantha's sister, standing beside a folder thick enough to shift the entire narrative, smiling with the unsettling confidence of someone holding secrets no one was prepared for. She claimed to have worse receipts, screenshots, recordings, and unseen footage that would expose not just Samantha, not just Mendeecees, but another unnamed woman who had been quietly involved long before the lounge incident ever surfaced. Yandy felt the world tilt again, realizing every assumption, every conclusion, every accusation had been arranged like pieces in someone else's game, with each reveal timed to fracture trust exactly when it was most vulnerable. The message ended with a chilling line: "Part 2 starts when you're ready to hear the truth." And just like that, the screen went black. No names, no locations, no next step, only a silent dare. The cliffhanger left everyone standing in uncertainty, trying to connect dots that no longer fit, knowing the real story hadn't even started yet. And now, as the tension spills into the final seconds of the episode, the viewer is left with the ultimate question: who is the missing woman? What role did Samantha's sister play? And how deep does this conspiracy actually go? Drop your theories, your predictions, and your wildest guesses in the comments below, because Part 2 is about to tear open everything you think you know, and nothing will be the same once the truth comes out. The truth comes out.